Hello, everybody. It's Monday, July 7th, and this is your Chapo. On today's episode, Felix and I are joined once again by our good friend Tim Faust to talk about the big, beautiful bill and his area of expertise, Medicaid. Tim, it's great to have you back on the show. Tim Faust, the man who sold his soul to the devil for knowledge about public policy.
That's right. That's what I'm all about. You know, one of these days I'll come on the show when we're not in the middle of a terrible crisis. But until then, I'm happy to be here once again.
Well, yeah, like this is sort of doubling down. We had you on not too long ago to talk about Medicaid, but now it appears that all the bad things have indeed come to pass, and it really does look like Medicaid. That's what's on the chopping block in this big, beautiful bill, through work requirements or cuts. Tim, just of what you've seen so far of the big, beautiful bill, and like from your perspective on what will this do to not just Medicaid, but to the healthcare system overall in the United States?
Sure. So as you mentioned, kind of the big centerpiece of the Medicaid cuts are the introduction of work requirements, which mean that if you are in the expansion population, you need to certify that you've done 80 hours of work or community engagement over the past month. Which doesn't sound like that much, but the act of doing that is a huge pain in the ass, right? Like there's a lot of infrastructure that's be in place, a lot of paperwork. They tried this in Arkansas and Georgia, and in Arkansas, I think like 17,000 people lost Medicaid because the infrastructure to like input this was not in place. In Georgia, like literally like the mascot they used, like the guy they used as like their face of the program, lost his Medicaid 3 separate times because the database that they used was not properly put together. This will cause, it's estimated, I think 16 million people total to lose their health care, 11 million losing Medicaid, and 5 million losing ACA coverage. It's the biggest retrenchment of healthcare programs ever to exist in American history, following the biggest passive retrenchment of healthcare benefits under the Medicaid unwinding post-COVID. It's we don't even know what's going to happen. All we know is that it's going to be bad. A lot of this is going to be on the individual states to figure out how they want to implement their programs with less money. But there's no way out of this that doesn't kill a lot of people.
I was looking at the work requirements, and the takeaway I have from all of this is, I mean, it's difficult to say this without sounding, I guess, alarmist, but this would be the time to be alarmist. It does seem like they're trying to figure out what is the most acceptable way to cull people. And the way that they have concluded is, well, the fewest amount of people will object to single adults with no children, but the Senate chose to expand that to people with children who are older than 14.
That's a really good point, right? Like Medicaid expansion under the Affordable Care Act kind of redefined the government role in healthcare, right? Previous to that, Medicaid was like a welfare program that was attached to, TAN for AFDC. It was a disability and super poor and child program. Under ACA expansion, under Medicaid expansion, there was an acknowledgement that like insurance as a consumer good is just totally unaffordable for a lot of different kinds of people. So therefore, the government has an obligation to expand it, which is sounds subtle, but it's a pretty radical transformation of the government's conception of its involvement in providing healthcare for its own people. And so the goal is to undo as much of that as possible. And you're right, like they picked they picked a couple of populations who they thought they could really lean on. One was the, theoretical, able-bodied, lazy, non-working, adult, the guy that plays video games instead of getting a job, which for the record, nothing wrong with that. Death Stranding 2 just came out. I'd much rather do that than work. That's the like imaginary person they're creating, as if somebody could get by, on the Medicaid's salary required and not be working, 30 hours a week or whatever. And then the other one was the specter of undocumented immigrants who are, taking away our Medicaid benefits. That's one they really leaned on in the past month or so. I think that line of rhetoric became like the de facto cover that so many swing state Republicans began using.
Well, yeah, I mean, along those lines, J.D. Vance this week posted of the big beautiful bill. He says the thing that will bankrupt this country more than any other policy is flooding the country with illegal immigration and then giving those migrants generous benefits. The OBBB fixes this problem and therefore it must pass. And then he says everything else, the CBO score, the proper baseline, and this quote is very telling. The minutia of Medicaid policy is immaterial compared to the ICE money and immigration enforcement provisions. Tim, what is the state? I mean, there is, as you said, there is the specter of the 35-year-old man playing video games in his mother's basement who's on Medicaid. But what about undocumented immigrants? Are they collecting? Are they a huge drain on Medicaid? Are they collecting Medicaid?
So individual states, so Medicaid is a state administered program. Individual states can set their own rules about who gets to use Medicaid. There's like a federal minimum, and then states can add on to that. And so a couple of states, like Minnesota, previously New York, went ahead and built in protections for undocumented people. Like really nothing, like pretty basic, like if you go to the ER, you get insurance kind of stuff. Nothing too lavish. And states chose to expand that, which is great. I think every state should. And what the Big Beautiful Bill does, this was originally in the House, they modified it in the Senate, I don't know where exactly it lands now, is that it adds extra punishment and extra costs for states that choose to do that. I think the original language was that states that chose to expand Medicaid to undocumented people would get a 10% reduction in their federal funding. Like, it's hard to get crueler than that. Like, they're forcing states to pit undocumented people and people with disabilities against each other. It's really just, and on top of that is, the $80 billion for ICE or whatever, right? They're building the secret police and they're using the specter of, immigration on all sides of the fucking ball here. Which I really is some of the worst shit to happen in recent memory.
Yeah, I mean, it's especially notable that they're doing this right amidst Trump, who sort of, in a move similar to what Biden would do to Kamala, has sort of informally given JD the wonderful job of selling this piece of shit, while Trump has kind of, with Kristi Noem, made these public appearances where he's like, I know that we said that immigrants are bad because they, it's like wage competition that domestic workers cannot possibly compete with. But we actually talked to agribusiness and hotel owners and people who own restaurants. And it turns out that's the only way this economy works, is if they can do that. So we're not doing that enforcement. But we are going to keep ruining people's lives. Don't worry about that. But don't worry, we're walking backwards into doing the same system that the past 5 or 6 presidents have realized you need to have if you're going to have this kind of a service economy. But I am interested, though, in I've seen a few examples of this, of regional hospital systems just preemptively saying we're not going to be able to cover the shortfall of people using emergency rooms, of the greatly diminished receipts for just running these hospitals. But could you explain a little bit how Medicaid is kind of one of the last pillars keeping the American medical system, in so much as it exists for the general public, functioning?
Yeah, Medicaid is like a load-bearing pillar of society, and that's not hyperbolic. That's not an exaggeration. So Medicaid, among a bunch of other things, is one of the primary funders of healthcare in rural areas. In rural areas, you've got a disproportionately high number of people who are on Medicaid, so Medicaid's the primary funder of small clinics and rural hospitals. Some either directly paying for individual service acts or through providing like bulk payments to hospitals. And that's the one thing, Medicaid doesn't pay that much. Half of rural hospitals are like barely above water. Medicaid was the one thing keeping those in place.
Yeah, Tim, to that point, this is just from NPR's coverage of it. It says here the GOP's plan curtails a practice known as provider taxes that nearly every state has used for decades to increase Medicaid payments to hospitals, nursing homes, and other providers, and to private managed care companies. States often use the federal money generated through the taxes the taxes to pay the institutions more than Medicaid would otherwise pay. Medicaid generally pays lower fees for care than Medicare, the program for people over 65 and some with disabilities and private insurance. But thanks to provider taxes, some hospitals are paid more under Medicaid than Medicare, according to the Commonwealth Fund, a health research nonprofit. Hospitals and nursing homes say they use these extra Medicaid dollars to expand or add new services and improve care for patients.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things happening there. And I'll take those on. So the provider tax cut is, after work requirements, like the second biggest cut in the Big Beautiful Bill. Basically, the way it works, to simplify it, is that federal government subsidizes, like if I spend $1 on Medicaid, the federal government pitches in, $1.50 or whatever, right? It covers 60% of all Medicaid expenditures. So a provider tax is, you're a hospital, I'm the state. I say, give me $1 in tax. You say, okay. And then I spend $1 that I got from you, but the feds kick in $1.50. So overall, we draw down more federal money, which, sure, can sound a little shifty, but it's been regulated at the federal level before. This is like a pretty accepted way that states pay for Medicaid, because healthcare payments are fundamentally not super affordable on a state level without massive federal subsidy. So cutting those and even decreasing them over time, again, for expansion states, is like a fucking stake through the heart of this thing that was shambling along, keeping healthcare functioning. And yeah, there is a study which indicates that some hospitals get paid more through Medicaid overall through these bonus payments than through Medicare. But it is worth pointing out that hospital finances, at large, are super opaque. And so every hospital association will claim that every hospital's just like the brink of failure rural hospital, when you've actually got these massive hospital chains that are multi-billion-dollar hospital systems that are nowhere near the level of impoverishment that the rural healthcare systems are. So you've got a real mix there. But rural healthcare systems are the ones that are really going to bear the brunt of these costs. It's going to shut down a lot of clinics, a lot of hospitals in poor neighborhoods and in rural areas.
The thing that I at least, that keeps sticking for me when I thought about the just generalized red state program policies since about 2021 and since Dobbs especially, it has been a suite of policies that broadly are okay, we need 5 times as many children that no one wants. We need a comprehensive family abduction system. We need a Palantir surveillance system. But now it's just, if you live in a red state, and a lot of blue states, but red states specifically for this, you can be forced into motherhood at gunpoint, and then I guess you will have to drive 700 miles to the nearest hospital to have the baby. And if you have a miscarriage or there's any difficulty in the pregnancy during that point, you will go to prison.
I mean, you're absolutely right. They're tightening the screws further and further on what's the bare minimum amount of dignity people are required to have to live in this country. It's absolutely abominable. And these Medicaid cuts are we don't necessarily know how they're going to fuck people over, because states need to figure out what to do with their reduced funding. But there's no way out of this that doesn't immiserate tens of millions of people across the country.
I think it's it's poetic that J.D. Vance sort of emerged into the national consciousness with a book called Hillbilly Elegy, because he's going to be authoring quite a few obituaries for poor white people in rural parts of the country with this bill. And I just thought it was very telling when he said he spoke about the minutia of Medicaid policy as something that was trivial compared to the project of ethnically cleansing the country with ICE.
Yeah, I mean, I live in Wisconsin, which is a purple state, and we've got a couple of swing districts. And the one I've been focusing on most is in the far west side of the state. We've got this guy, Derek Van Orden. You might have heard of him. He gets in the news a lot for getting really, really drunk and yelling at children. That's not a joke. That's like his. He does that a good bit.
Well, I mean, he does represent the great state of Wisconsin.
That's true. He's one of us. What can I say? So I was following him as like kind of my thermometer or my barometer for where the argument was at. And at the beginning of it, he wanted to back away from saying there'd be any cut to Medicaid. Anybody who deserves Medicaid will still have Medicaid. The notion of deservingness, of course, being a pretty nuanced there. And then over time, that shifted to, oh no, it's all the immigrants that are stealing our money, whatever. That's where they all indexed on was Medicaid isn't even an issue. We just need to take care of fraud, waste, and abuse means undocumented immigrants taking our money. That's what they live with. And I mean, this is a bit beyond the scope of healthcare, but I think that's a consequence of Democrats totally backing away from the immigrant argument at all over the past 4 years. They opened the door for they would have justified this regardless with any kind of I don't think that Democrat weakness led to Medicaid cuts, but this particular line of rhetoric, I think, is a direct consequence of there being no positive articulation of immigration during the Biden presidency.
You're 100% right. I mean, the Democratic response, and it was before the election of Trump, there was already some concessions because that was sort of the popularist thing that this sort of a broadly defined but extremely harsh immigration regime at the federal level. It pulled pretty well during the latter Biden years, at least according to some. But just Democrats broadly concurring with the idea that, this is a central problem for everything, just everything. Well, yeah, if you just concur on that basis, it will get used for, the central parts of every GOP platform for the last 50, 60, 70 years, which is obliterating any part of the New Deal legacy or anything beyond that, obliterating any part of the threadbare welfare state. And I don't know how. I mean, I think a lot of them just didn't think about it, or they are pro austerity themselves. But some could be short-sighted enough to actually be surprised that this is coming back and biting these threadbare programs that are the only thing that keep a lot of any facet of American healthcare or anything functioning.
You had some nominal dissenters over the past few months, right? Think of Josh Hawley, for example. People that said, no, we can't cut Medicaid. My state depends upon this thing to keep functioning. We should talk about that in a second. There's some really interesting popular victories there, but they all folded. Everybody folded. Lisa Murkowski said, I'm going to vote for this bill, but I hope it doesn't pass. They all fucking folded once Trump came to the office. You had a couple of senators and a couple of guys in the House, most of whom were, on the far right, who said they weren't going to vote for the bill. And then Trump comes to their office and gives them a signed hat or whatever, and they all fucking fold.
Well, Tim, don't you think that makes such an interesting juxtaposition with how the Biden administration handled their signature domestic policy agenda, which the Build Back Beautiful the infrastructure bill, it very clearly the Trump quarterbacked this bill and he wanted it passed, and they weren't going to split the bill into two different things like Biden did. The contrast here could not be more telling, in my opinion, between how these two parties approach. Just the effort that Trump will undertake to pass probably one of the most unpopular bills in American history versus Biden just trying to fill potholes. It just seems like for some reason that when the Democrats are in power, they just can't do anything. They can't get Joe Manchin to fucking come on board with this bill. There's no pressure that they can put on him. I mean,
by the way, this is the most unpopular major bill. I mean, since we have begun polling major bills, this is the single most unpopular one. And need I remind people, one of Joe Biden's sales pitches was, hey, all these Bernie plans look great, but who do you want working the phones in Congress?
Yes.
I'm the guy that can get it done.
So it's another thing that really bothers me about this is that, yes, this is an insanely unpopular bill, but nobody knows about it. That's the fucking thing. 8% of people knew that Medicaid cuts were in this bill. That's a total, a good contrast is comparing why the ACA was not repealed in 2017 and why Medicaid was just hacked to pieces. The activists, the disability community was just as loud now as they were in 2017. A lot of the professional organizing and activist class was just as loud now as it was in 2017. And you can't, I don't want to imply that this bill was passed with the consent of the Democrats. That's not how this happens. But the level of volume that the Hakeem Jeffries and James Carville wing of the party made for the big beautiful bill was zero. Nobody was fucking getting on TV. Very few people were pounding the pavement. A total abdication of their responsibility to make noise and draw attention to the bill. And as a result, this is going to be a surprise immiseration for a lot of people. And there is no clear articulation of who's causing the problem and why the problem is being caused and what the way out of it is. It's just a total fucking failure from the Democratic wing of the party.
I mean, will you say that, Tim? I mean, you say that there was nothing, that this is the most important thing that they should be focusing on. You're forgetting that they spent all week fretting about the popular Democratic mayoral candidate who just won a primary.
You know what? I forgot that.
Yeah.
The fact that he checked off that he was African or whatever on his Columbia application is way more important than 17 million people losing Medicaid.
I remember when we were talking about that period from about the last 2 months of 2024, when Ruben Gallego and all those people, Fetterman especially, they were taking a very Fetterman-esque path of going, okay, I guess this is the most popular thing now, and there's no, I mean, this is just how it's going to be from now until indefinite, and there's certainly no precedent of Republican administrations becoming radioactively unpopular by instituting austerity. That's just not going to happen. And it took until the first month of the legislative agenda of the Trump administration for any Democrats to remember, oh, right, we're ostensibly supposed to be against austerity, at least some of us. Maybe even in that time, I would have thought that a bill this bad, literally the most unpopular bill of all time, that is an actual bill and not one of those weird stunt bills that the Blue Dog Caucus puts out, where it's let's give all of our B-2 bombers to Israel. That would not awaken the party, but they could do the bare minimum, as they are wont to do sometimes. But no, this is just, I guess they tried in their own way, but it's kind of like the same idea of Biden going out there and trying to work the phones like LBJ or something. I guess he could try to do that, but what result would you get?
Yeah.
It's the same thing. If Hakeem Jeffries was doing a 50-state tour in opposition to the bill, what outcome would you actually get? It's not even that they're doing a bad job. I mean, they are, but that even if they were doing everything that they were supposed to do, they would not be able to do it. They would not be able to really make a dent, I don't think.
Well, I mean, I think you have to question as well, as far as the Democratic leadership of the party, I don't think that they really are. I don't think they really have a problem with cutting Medicaid, because I think it gets to this idea. And Tim, I want to talk about work requirements. I think it cuts to the heart of this idea, is that they don't like the idea of undeserving people getting something for free, and I think that really bothers them. And I know that they have to publicly say that we support it and these cuts are disastrous and terrible. But I think that's a little good cop, bad cop routine going on with the passage of this bill, because I think the Democratic Party, I think they are hostile to the idea of quote unquote entitlements, and that someone could be not working and have health insurance.
Well, I think I agree in the sense that this is the extension of the great compulsion towards means testing, which has taken a stranglehold on the liberal approach to benefit programs for the past 60 years, right? The idea that you must find the absolute smallest number of deserving people and give them the benefit. And really, I talked to a guy in Kaukauna, Wisconsin, who has one of those jobs where his monthly income is variable, right? And I think he was a cobbler, and depending on how he made prosthetic feet, which is cool. But based on the volume of work he did each month, his income would fluctuate. So some months he had enough Some months he didn't make enough and he qualified for Medicaid, and some months he would make 1 or 2 feet too many and get kicked off his insurance. Right? That's stupid.
It's feast or famine when it comes to foot accidents. Sometimes there's a lot. Sometimes it's pretty sparse.
Completely fucking ridiculous. And it is worth acknowledging that this is under the system of healthcare, health insurance allotment that Obama came up with, right? This is the ACA plan that, again, we acknowledge quietly that healthcare as a consumer good is not affordable for regular people, right? Nobody I know can afford to pay for all their healthcare costs out of pocket, because people I know are, generally not multi-billionaires. So we have to do something to make sure they can afford that healthcare. And because healthcare costs skyrocket every year, and we're doing fucking nothing to bring them down, those premiums that get passed on through private insurance also aren't affordable. So we're going to put together this hybrid model where people who are profitable get subsidies that we pay directly to private insurers, and people who aren't, the low income, the sick, the poor, will just nut up and pay for their healthcare directly, even though there is, some private profit cutting in the middle of that there. But yeah, I mean, there was so much reluctance to expanding healthcare as a federal benefit program beyond even that minuscule 138%. And I do think there is a schism in the party. I believe there are the real freaks who want to drown Medicaid or make it as small as possible. But I have seen a lot of people, Mark Pocan from Madison, Gwen Moore from Milwaukee, who have come out and articulated a demand for things like Medicare for all, which I think is literally the only way out of this. Even if we manage to undo 4 years from now, knock on wood, everything that this bill does, simply avoiding catastrophe is not promoting justice, right? Medicaid was pretty fucked up to begin with. Not enough people had it. It didn't pay enough. There were a lot of problems there. And you can't just hope you can partially undo some of the disaster and get to a good place. No, I really do think that the only way to even attempt to undo and build off of and improve the absolute catastrophe we're facing down is through a federal universal single payer program. And I can't predict the future. In 2015, I never would have told you that Medicare for all would be the topic of conversation in the 2020 primaries. So I don't want to say in either direction whether that's going to become a thing again, whether we'll have a fucking country, or an election in a couple of years. I don't want to predict that either. But I think that's the only way forward. I think that's the only conceivable way to articulate a vision of healthcare in this country that isn't such fucking stupid ping-ponging back and forth with the nihilists.
I mean, it is astounding. If there was any other product where it is, as you said, it is impossible for most people to afford it without government subsidy. If Netflix was like that, and also it sucked. No one really liked it. If you had to pay for Netflix by a monthly subscription, and then you had to pay again when you wanted to watch an episode of a TV show, that would be the equivalent. If you want to watch Pain and Gain, and then it puts on Bridgerton on a Bangladeshi dub, and then you have to set aside the next 3 days to work through a phone bank to talk to somebody, and then they're like, well, we can offer you a coupon if you want to watch Bosch, because we have a coupon that allows you to use Amazon streaming service for 3 days, but only if you make $10,000 less this year. No one would allow that.
We're offering all Americans a voucher to watch one sketch from I Think You Should Leave every year.
Yeah. But I feel the same way about predicting the future. But knowing that, we talked a little bit about how, Medicaid is kind of the pillar holding this entire thing up. In your best estimate, what do you think this looks like after implementation? In your worst case scenario where, this just goes on unfettered.
It's very easy to think about Medicaid as affecting just Medicaid recipients, right? A thing I see a lot of the time is that we all kind of assume healthcare or health policy or Medicaid is a thing that happens to other people. But the consequences of cutting Medicaid are way broader reaching than just the 80 million people that use Medicaid, right? You've got medical workers at like a lot of facilities. Again, like
just the 80 million people.
Yeah, just 80 million people.
Yeah.
Just 40% of American
right. It's
children.
It's no problem. It's just those guys. But like there's a workers. This is a workers' rights issue as well. Not just at the clinics that need Medicaid to stay afloat, but home health workers, long-term care workers, county healthcare programs. Like I talked to a guy's mom uses a county healthcare program. He's nonverbal autism, and the county healthcare program gave him job training and picks him up in a bus and takes him to work. That's all funded by Medicaid, So that bus driver, that county healthcare worker, that job training program, that bus, like all that shit goes away if Medicaid is cut. You've also got entire parts of the country where Medicaid is the one thing propping the hospital up. I was in Wild Rose, Wisconsin, which I think is like population 680, small fucking town. 2 gas stations. One of them has a gigantic Israeli flag. And I talked to a guy. I talked to a guy, nice guy, who was like, "Listen, I'm 72 or whatever. I had a heart attack 2 years ago, and the only reason I'm alive is because the local hospital, which was 15 minutes away, was able to save my life. But this is an area where 40% of children are on Medicaid. Like, what happens if Medicaid gets cut? Will that hospital still be there?" And I got to say, like, I don't know, man. Like, it's very probable that it won't be. Hospital systems don't keep individual hospitals open out of charity. They are money making, they're profit seeking organizations, even if they're not for profit. And they will close facilities that serve that are the only things that serve like entire regions of the US if they don't get those Medicaid dollars. People will get fucked over. So you've got like massive constituencies here, well beyond, that mere 80 million people that use Medicaid. And it's going to be up to somebody to define that constituency, to say, listen, this shit affects all of us in so many ways, whether we're filling out the Medicaid application or not. Not, of course, to mention friends and family and loved ones. This is like, it's not universal, but it's as universal a healthcare issue as I can think of in America right now. And people, that thread needs to be drawn. You got to make that argument. I see little foundations of it here and there, but that's, I think, the $1 million question is can somebody really piece that together at the popular level?
Yeah, that is something we've talked about a lot with homeless policy on a municipal and state level, that it is in effect deputizing every person who lives in any city with a housing problem that's that bad and automatically deputizing them as an unpaid volunteer police officer, social worker, or whatever else. That is now your role if you live in a city where the problem is bad enough. With Medicaid, like you're describing, it is suddenly this massive tax of time, energy, of life away from people. I remember you describing that the last time you were on, the extra moments of life that just even the bare minimum of care affords people. Something I was thinking about with this is one of the only vectors of like social mobility or even just treading water in America is for someone to get like a nursing degree or to work as a radiology tech. When all these hospital systems are just, they have to preemptively shut down or are forced to shut down when whatever type of healthcare facility per capita in a lot of these rural places where people are much poorer, when they have to go away, what does that do to employment?
You remind me of a woman I talked to in North Milwaukee. North Milwaukee is the part of Milwaukee that's been like was like the redlined neighborhood, total structural divestment, like a lot of very poor people, and it's a majority Black neighborhood. And I talked to a young woman, maybe 23 or 24, who is a home health worker for her mother. So Medicaid pays for her mother's home health and therefore pays her salary. And so she does home health for her mother 8 hours a day and goes to class in the evenings. And this will literally uproot every single part of her life. Her mother will no longer get home health. She won't have a job, and her ability to pay for education will no longer be there. And also worth noting, now they're capping student loan ceilings as well. So it's just, this woman's just fucked. I mean, there is like this is like they're getting her from every fucking possible angle.
It's like they don't want any opportunity for someone to like work or help anyone unless you're in, I don't know, being a crypto trader or just gambling on sports. Actually, no. Actually, the Big Beautiful Bill does tax gambling, wins and losses. That's one thing in it that I do approve of.
Yeah, the only way that you are a full American citizen is if you are a member of the Hillel chapter.
Yeah. But Tim, to go back to this idea about like a tax on people's time and dignity, like I was talking about like what is the reality of these like the work requirements, and not just like the tax on people's time and dignity that it imposes on people who like want to claim benefits, but also like the tax on the time and resources of the government itself to follow up and like check up on all the paperwork of everyone to see if they qualify or not. Like isn't that a massive drain on the resources of the state that could be used to just provide care for people, in terms of this like ridiculous system of having to check if someone's worked 80 hours a week, or if they're doing community service, or if their kids are young enough, or what, like what is the reality? Like, what does that look like in the lives of people who previously like would have qualified for Medicaid, but now we're faced with this like series of hurdles and hoops that they have to jump through?
You know, I was in Tennessee in 2019. I think I was outside of Nashville, and I talked to a lawyer who was facing this exact circumstance, that he was representing a client who was trying to enroll in Medicaid and get a disability certification. And literally the office he went to did not share a database environment with a different office the guy had moved from. There was no fucking infrastructure whatsoever to like build this kind of thing in the state. And you've hit exactly what's going to happen. Like there is no funding. There is no infrastructure there. A lot of states will not hire the people they need to like enforce these programs or build the data resources or the technical infrastructure. Yeah, it's just fucking going to be. It's going to fall apart.
Will try to be in compliance with this new regime and find themselves unable to, because the states themselves will not have the resources to confirm or check up if on their compliance.
The kind of the prototype we have is during Medicaid unwinding, which happened under Biden, though I'm not going to say it was Biden's fault, although he didn't advocate for it pretty hard. 70% of people who lost Medicaid following the COVID freeze lost it for procedural or paperwork reasons, because the computer system wasn't able to like process them in time, or didn't have their eligibility records, or something got fucked up, or paperwork got misfiled. Like, listen, like in my day job, I help build software to help enroll people in Medicaid, and it's really fucking hard. It's hard even if you have a person like by your side walking you through the entire process. The volume of paperwork you need to collect and put in an application and get processed and check up on, that's literally a full-time job. And if all of a sudden you're adding a whole new fucking dimension to it, because not only are they adding monthly work requirement attestations, they're also adding twice annual recertification. You have to reapply toe-to-tip for Medicaid every 6 months. There's no fucking universe in which any state has the infrastructure to support that right now, and most states aren't going to find the money to do it in the coming years. Also, one thing I do want to call out is it's very easy to say, oh, this only affects, the, let's say, turning 37 in 2 weeks year old guy who plays Death Stranding 2 all day long. No, like, if
you build those roads. We're not building roads in America, so we got to build them in Australia.
Got to have infrastructure somewhere,
Yeah.
People with disabilities, there's like an assumption that like they get a pass or an exemption, which is like correct if you can file the paperwork to prove that you're disabled, which is like a lot of fucking work. If you talk to anybody with a chronic long-term disability, getting that certification from the state really, really sucks. And they fucking check up on you every month to see if you're still disabled to qualify for SSDI. Like, you are not spared work requirement paperwork if you have like a major disability. Just got to fill out a different form instead. Yeah, they're fucking drowning people. Like, what this is it's a statement that the time value of living, if you are poor or you are disabled, is not worth anything. And so fuck you, fill this shit out and chase it down. And if you can't, sorry, bitch, you don't get healthcare this month.
Well, Felix, this goes back to what you said about like this is sort of a strategy of sort of how many people can we literally just cull who are net drains on society because they're disabled or poor? Like, is it too strong to describe like the thinking behind this as sort of a kind of passive Action T4.
I mean, it is eugenics. At some point, it's not hyperbolic to use that term, which I use pretty sparingly because that has a similar connotation. But this is social murder, right? The Engels phrase for when you put stuff to get when you don't actively kill somebody, but you just permit them to die through the existence of structures that make their lives worse, whatever, right? If you don't take care of pollution and crowding and cramped work environments, people die as a result, and you let that happen, that's social murder. This is that. This is a form of eugenic policy. And it's pretty open and shut. This is a process by which people who are vulnerable, people who need help, who, again, worth remembering, could be literally any one of us in this call a month from now if shit breaks the wrong way. It's a way of letting them die because it's a hassle to take care of them otherwise, and because they don't inspire or engender the pity or sympathy at the social, at a structural and social level. I don't think it's hyperbolic to claim that this one big beautiful bill is a manifestation of eugenic healthcare policy.
Even if the states had funding to unify their databases, to proceduralize these recertifications, just the idea of making someone like a fucking 30-year-old who just caught a shit break and they have ALS, 30 years before it is even normal to have this extremely low percentage disease, making them go through this thing twice annually is that is indignity enough. But in practice, think about at the federal level, where there is money for this, where you are supposed to do things right and have the resources to do that. How the implementation of things like the no-fly list. Think about the implementation of these ICE roundups, where they regularly take people who have identification or have their fucking birth certificate on them somehow. No, it doesn't count. It doesn't look real. Like, there is just no universe where you don't boot millions of people who actually do qualify under these extremely fucking brutal standards, where you just don't boot them off. And yeah, I completely agree. That is the eugenics program.
You're absolutely right. People who, even if you accept the frame of deservingness, which I don't, and neither do you guys, but if you accept the frame of eligibility or whatever, right? People who are legally eligible for Medicaid are going to lose Medicaid. That's kind of the point. It is a sieving process. And instead we're black bagging kindergartners. That's where we're allocating our funds. Shit has got kind of fucked up in bullshit.
Don't forget the Golden Dome missile shield project.
Oh my god! With the technology that only exists in Metal Gear Solid 1. They say they're launching anti-ballistic. The science isn't even out on how good anti-ballistic missiles are. You know why? Because there aren't a lot of instances of people firing a ton of ballistic missiles at North America. But for the most part, missile defense in a lot of cases is saying, I think as easy as it is to shoot someone, just as easily I can slice a bullet out of the sky with a katana.
I mean, in that sense, Hideo Kojima's vision of Metal Gear Solid is a little bit aspirational, because if we had if we had that cyborg ninja, things would be a little bit different around here,
You're that ninja. I've been waiting for you, Snake. Who are you? Neither enemy nor friend. I am back from a world where such words are meaningless. I've removed all obstacles. Now you and I will battle to the death. What do you want? I've waited a long time for this day. Now I want to enjoy the moment.
What's with these guys? It's like one of my Japanese animes.
I'm glad we brought up eugenics, because I want to get to the next thing I want to talk about. But Felix, before I do that, I have a tweet that was selected specifically to make you mad, and I'm wondering if I can share it right now.
All right. Is this the JD tweet?
No. This is Aaron Rupar, one of your favorites.
Let's go. We don't like him, but he is the best journalist in America.
This is Aaron. His heart's in the right place, but this is a tweet that is constructed specifically, I think, to make you mad. Aaron Rupar posted the other day. The interesting thing about the Diddy verdict is that House Republicans are about to vote to take away health care from tens of millions of Americans.
What fucking point is he trying to make?
Well, he's saying that we shouldn't care about the Diddy verdict. We should care about the people, tens of millions of people losing their health care, which I agree with.
Me and Andrew from E1 were talking about this recently, how there's like a shitty type of backpack rap where they say everything is a distraction. Like everything is like a distraction from lyricism. You were focusing on Kendrick versus Drake, but not lyricism. And it's like, oh, silly me. How could I be so fooled? And this is, I mean, this is a very like Trump 1 style of tweet where it would be like, oh, did you hear about Shawn Mendes? And it would be a link and it would be like register to vote. I'm going to guess that got 70,000 retweets. So distraction failed.
Yeah. So yeah, that was Aaron Rupar. But since we're talking about eugenics, I did want to talk about the really like the perfect story that sums up the New York Times as an institution, because this story broke right after we got done recording on Thursday. But like by now you've probably heard about it or already forgotten about it. Basically, like to give a rundown here, Columbia University was hacked sometime in 2024. And like basically all the admissions data of like, you know, tons of students who applied to Columbia and their applications was hacked. And basically, Nazis decided to dig around into the data to determine whether Columbia was secretly doing affirmative action or something. But basically, in the applications was Zoran Mandani's application to Columbia. And in it, he checked the boxes for ethnicity of both Asian and African American or / Black. And then, like, I think he specified from Uganda because he thought that was the best representation of his, I don't know, ethnic background or makeup. I don't like, but the point is that like this data, like the broker, the middleman who gave the New York Times this data is a big. I don't think I would be speaking out of turn to say he is a eugenicist neo-Nazi with gums like Mr. Ed, whose name is Jordan Lasker. But the New York Times described him as, let's see here. The data was shared with the Times by an intermediary who goes by the name Cremu on Substack and X. He provided the data under condition of anonymity, although his identity has been made public elsewhere. He is an academic who opposes affirmative action and often writes about IQ and race, which is a very gentle way of putting what this guy's main area of concerns are. He is he used to blog under the username Tranny Porno on Reddit. And some of his articles that he's written include The Myth of Nigerian Excellence, National IQs Are Valid, Intermarriage in America Post-Loving v. Virginia, How Many Sexual Misconduct Allegations Are False, and Food Deserts Are Not Real.
By the way, with this guy, he is, to use the term coined by Brace, previous episode, a hebophile.
Yes.
His sister, by the way, making the only post worth recording ever on Blue Sky, posted a lot about Creamy Jordan. What I remember mostly is Creamy Jordan is lying to his fiance about being Jewish and having a bar mitzvah when really he converted. And I have to say, like, I used to really not think about philosemitism a lot. I think if I ever thought about it, 10, 11, 12 years ago, I thought, oh, that's nice of them. Now, I only think that about the Japanese ones. If you are a Westerner who's a Philio-Semite, you should start out in prison and have to earn your way out, because it's all maniacs like this guy. This guy, like, it's all fucking freaks all the way down. No Den Fujitas.
Yeah, his sister writes, he eventually dropped out of Southern because he was destroying his body with steroids. But before that, he joined a Jewish fraternity and changed his name to Hebrew on Facebook. He isn't Jewish. He made it up because he's obsessed with the racial concept of the Jew. And apparently, like, he's also fabricated quite a lot of his academic background as well. And it seems cliche, but like, is there a single person who's obsessed with race and IQ and eugenics who isn't a thoroughly unremarkable and mediocre person in every regard, who needs a grand narrative about how their birthright is being denied them by immigrants or non-white people or something. But like, they just seemed like he just couldn't hack it in his own profession or corner of academia.
Again, among the things that his sister revealed, he told his family that he defended his PhD thesis, and he's a PhD, now he's a doctor, but don't come out because it's not a big deal. That's what like shitty sons do when they're like, I've actually been going to community college. Like doing that with a PhD where you can look it up. And they did. They looked it up to see, is our son Creamy Jordan one of the new doctors? No, he wasn't. I mean, this guy, like, they should have written an expose, we disgusting man found. Well, the next guy that Trump should kill. That should have been their article.
Yeah, I mean, and he also did some light sex tourism blogging as well. But like, I bring all this up because, okay, like he was the intermediary for, private data that was hacked and then, published in the paper of record. And I'm not making an argument here about whether the journalistic ethics of publishing hacked material. Like, for instance, the New York Times did not publish the hacked material that, like, I don't know, Iranian hackers got about J.D. Vance's, like the Oppo research file on him. Maybe there was nothing worth publishing in there. But I just like the circumstances of how this story came to get published and why they chose to grant anonymity to and credibility to this particular source. I mean, like the Times public editor had to do like a 40-tweet thread trying to justify it. And look, you can make an argument about how newsworthy you think Zoran Mandani's application to Columbia, a school I should mention that he didn't even get into, despite the fact that his dad is a professor there. So it's like, I don't really even know what I'm supposed to be mad at in this story. But like, the point I want to make is, if Zoran Mandani had lost the primary, or if his platform were merely just free buses and childcare, and that like they did not try to make this entire primary a referendum on his support or non-support for Israel, if he had lost, this article would not have been published. And if he was within the Zionist wheelhouse, they would not have used Jordan Creamy as the anonymous interlocutor to sort of mainstream this private data that was hacked. Like, I think this is another attempt. They are not taking this lying down, and they're going to keep going with shit like this, no matter how badly it embarrasses them.
Yeah,
and also no matter how much this exposes so much of the abundance online sphere as being hand in glove with these like IQ neo-Nazi eugenicists.
Well, yeah, he spoke at the same conference as David Shore, I believe.
Yep.
Interesting. Popularism would mean one thing in 1936 Germany. I'll tell you that. But to me, it's not just Biden that will torch his whole thing for Israel. It's even like liberal institutions who you would think would know better. Everyone will do it. I mean, look at what Bill Ackman did to his own life.
Well,
this was a guy with like $7 billion, and now all he does is write essays that no one reads on X, the everything site. Like, if you're into Israel, you are in for it for the long haul.
It's kind of like how if you're a British person who discovers transphobia, it becomes literally the only thing you talk about for the subsequent 10 years. That's American Zionism.
Oh my God. Tim, you're right. The two most important reactionary thinkers of the last 20 years, it's not fucking Moldbug. The two guys, Graham Linehan and Demonius X. Those are the two guys.
Whenever I see Graham Linehan, it's always a fucking jump scare. I keep forgetting he actually looks like that. It's not a Photoshop.
But I'm looking at a photo of Jordan Creamy, aka tranny porno, and I just have to come back to this idea. Like, is there any person who is obsessed with race and IQ and racial hierarchy who has any accomplishments in their own life worth being proud of? Like, the people like who need to feel that like they are the beneficiary of some racial lineage that has been unfairly denied them. It's like, do you have anything in your own life to be proud of? Do you have anyone around you who likes you? or talks to you.
The guys who index on race and IQ seem to have as their primary accomplishments writing about race and IQ. It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah. The only guy I can think of, and I wouldn't say he's obsessed with race. He's actually really against the concept of IQ. And actually, Creamy Jordan had a feud with him. But he's obsessed with genetics.
Oh, and that's the good doctor.
Dr. Taleb.
Yeah, Dr. Taleb.
But he's like against.
No, he's anti-IQ. Yeah,
he's anti-IQ, but he loves genetics.
Well, he loves the Phoenician scheme.
But that's like, whatever. Have fun. Like, I don't. Hey, I'm not Phoenician.
Anyway, this story has really not gotten the traction that they had hoped it would be, because, like, I don't know, like, once again, like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be mad at Zoran Mandani doing. Not getting into Columbia, checking the wrong box on his college application. I mean, the guy was born in Uganda and lived in South Africa before he came to America.
Yeah, and, like, by the way, wasn't the big cultural lesson we were supposed to do, like, hey, if you made a mistake like this when you were, not even like this, something like actually like bad, when you were 17, that shouldn't follow you for the rest of your life unless you criticize Israel.
Yeah.
At any point in any of the rest of your life after that.
I'm like, but yeah, and this goes back to my original point. Like, there's no way you can tell me the Times would have regarded this story or like this story as newsworthy or their source as credible had Zoran Mandani lost the primary or had he won the primary and been inside the Zionist tent. They would probably be covering for him now if this was the case. Even if you think that like this was some, that this was a cynical attempt to game the college admissions system, which is like, fair enough if you want to believe that. Like, colleges, and like that's another thing. People care too much about college. I'm so sick of anything that has to do with college. And it's just like, once again, he didn't even get into Columbia. If you wanted to make fun of him, you should the story should be he didn't get into Columbia despite having that kind of immigrant background and his dad being a famous professor at the university.
I mean, this makes me like him more. This is fail son excellence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that means he tried to like do a web comment for his essay or something. Will, you're completely right. I've seen so many childless people talking about how sad they are about the death of the SAT. Like, what is wrong with you, you maniac?
I remember the last time I took the SAT, and this was after like all the practice tests. I took the SAT twice, and the last time I took it, that was the last standardized test I ever took in my life. And I took the GREs. I didn't study for it though. And I remember leaving the classroom of where it was administered, and I remember just feeling like this immense sense of relief washed over me, because I was like, this is the last time in my life I will ever think about or care about standardized testing ever again. And like for some people, it just never ends.
Yeah, one of 8,000 things that specifically annoys me is this obsession with theater kids. Everyone thinks everyone that's annoying is a theater kid, which, by the way, middle school was 50 years ago for all of us. The youngest Zoomer is 47. Like, let's let it go with the theater kid stuff. It's not, it's not theater kids who are talking every day about advanced placement scores and the death of the SAT and how it's the admission standards for like Texas Tech are unfair now. It's STEM people or failed STEM people that write these blogs called the quantum of identity.
Well, yeah, it's just like it's such a perfect New York Times disaster, because like they just don't know what to do, and I think like this has to be understood in the context of like their long series of errors about surrounding this mayoral race. Because remember, like a while ago, they were like, we're not going to endorse local races anymore. We want to be a national paper. And then they came up with like the Council of Learned New Yorkers to endorse, and like it was too varied. And then they did the editorial saying Zoran's not fit to be mayor written by a guy who lives in Washington D.C. full time, David Little. and then like that wasn't good enough. Zoran won the primary easily, and is going, and let's be honest, is going to win in November. Like I think there's almost no doubt of that, because him losing depends on Andrew Cuomo and Eric Adams and their supporters engaging in some sort of coordinated action in which one of them will have to drop out. And the question is, even if that were the case and they like consolidated support, who is a stronger candidate, Andrew Cuomo or Eric Adams?
Well, Andrew Cuomo, you have to understand that this primary was unfair for him. Can you think of a worse base of support for Andrew Cuomo than New York City registered Democrats? So I think when they open it up,
well, what kind of make it a toss-up for me is if Cuomo and Adams come to an agreement where Cuomo runs for mayor, but Adams gets to like hang out the entire time, kind of like as a like whenever a hookah bar opens, Eric Adams gets to show up for like that'd make it a little. I mean, I was planning on coming out to canvas for Zoran in September, but an Eric Adams preeminent nightlife mayor situation might make it a little harder to decide.
Well, if it becomes a contest, let's just say I have done some in-house polling about my favorability with New York, and I will be doing anti-canvassing for Zoran to dissociate myself from him and attach myself to whoever the New York Times candidate is, to bring them down by a good 12 points.
Yeah, so that's the controversy we didn't get to last week. But if you've already forgotten about it, I don't blame you, because like the whole thing is a complete shambles. They got nothing. They got nothing, and they have still not really gotten to the fact that they tried to make this primary a referendum on Israel, and it failed. And in fact, by making it a referendum on Israel, they increased Zoran's chances of winning. It probably greatly increased his support.
That is one of the most insane choices that they could have, like, Jesus Christ.
Because like everything, like they still haven't gotten it, because it's been a week since it's been like 2 weeks since he won now. Fuck, I can't even remember. And every time I see on TV, they're like, he supported Hamas in a rap song he did 15 years ago, and I'm like, I already voted for him. You don't need to sell it this hard.
Yeah. By the way, he supported people who donated to a charity in Palestine that the federal government loves doing this. We've decided that charity that, your bank had no problem doing the transfer with because the Treasury Department okayed it. That's Hamas now. So you're going to prison for the rest of your life. I mean, I don't know what it is, if they legitimately just are in denial that this is now like an 80-20 issue with the Democratic base.
They are in denial about it, and like that's why I think like they thought that this was a silver bullet, because like this goes to the heart of like identity issues and sort of like designed to just drive a wedge between Zoran and his supporters and and black people in this country, that like he was sort of unjustly claiming the racial identity of African American to game the system. But like I said, I think it's a pretty limp effort. I don't think anyone really cares all that much. But this is in lieu of the fact that they cannot deal with the fact that he's not towing the line on Israel, and that like that is not just no longer a liability, it's actually a benefit to you in the Democratic primary.
The Zionist lobby has totally overplayed its hand, and especially in this election, whatever. Right? You're right. It's the issue has flipped, especially among young Democrats. And I think a lot of what happens in 2 and 4 years comes down to whether or not the Democratic Party leaders can reckon with that, or if they, like the Columbia alumni group chat, go fucking apeshit about this and try to make it a bigger and bigger and bigger issue every single election.
We said we're out of the prediction racket, but I have one on. I have a pretty I have a pretty solid prediction about which route they're going to go down on this. But I think it's funny because I think all the attacks on him is like they keep presuming and keep wanting him to run an identity politics campaign, which he very strenuously did not do. And that's why they're making everything now about his identity as a Muslim, as an Indian, as an African, because like he's not really doing that. I mean, he'll mention it, but like he's mentioning it. He never talks about himself and like his struggle. He just talks about like he always brings it back to the experiences of New Yorkers writ large. And like he ran an affordability campaign. He did not run the identity politics campaign. And I think the interesting is like the attacks on him are all sort of like predicated on this idea that he did run an identity politics campaign that's all about being, New York's first Muslim mayor, or upholding immigrant voices and spaces and whatnot.
Yeah, I don't want to glaze the guy too hard because I do need to anti-cannabis just to make sure. But I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that both Zoran, the guy, and Zoran's campaign are a result of someone who actually learned all the lessons of the last 10 years of the American left. At least all from all the public failures.
Yeah.
And among those are, not saying I'll be New York City's first woke mayor.
If I can tie both half of the episodes together with something on that, when I first came on a couple months ago, I was launching a series of talks across Wisconsin. I think I did 16 or 18 talks across Wisconsin in the past few months. And we don't have enough urban areas for us all to be urban. So a lot of them are like in really rural or small or even conservative areas. And I talked to a lot of people who don't see themselves represented in like the Democratic Republican paradigm or whatever, right? I think the idea that we live in a country of quiet socialists has not been proven true, especially in Wisconsin, which is genuinely a purple state. But talking to people about these very real healthcare issues and how they shape their life and what this means for people like them and people they care about was an entry point for people who are otherwise completely checked out of the political process. And I don't want to see Medicaid cuts in terms of electoral potential. I think that's a little nasty. But I mean, the person who goes out there and makes the argument, kind of what we saw with Bernie 2016 and 2020, like, listen, like, these things that shape your life, you deserve to have a dignified life. You deserve to be able to afford your healthcare or not have to pay for healthcare in the first place. You deserve to live freely in your own body. I think that is powerful. I think that is activating in ways that fall outside of the, clan affiliation of Democrat or Republican. That's kind of, I think, the only way forward in a state like Wisconsin. So I'm really hoping that we can drive that home over the next couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is a wide open lane for anyone who wants to take it.
Tim Faust, I think that's a good place to wrap up today's show. Tim, once again, thanks so much for joining us. And thanks for, once again, for all the work you're doing in Wisconsin to just, help people and, and organize around the issue of healthcare in this country, which is, as I've said many times, I think like the most glaring like chasm to which this country is sliding into, but it would be theoretically the easiest to fix. And Tim, I once again have to thank you and admire you for all the work you're doing on just helping people.
If I can shout out a Chapo listener who set up a town hall because she heard the podcast last time. Her name is Elena. She lives in rural Wisconsin. In her town of 2,200 people, she brought out 75 people.
Wow! Because
she heard this podcast. That's like she was her first time organizing anything like that. So I was very grateful for the platform, and I think people can do really interesting things when they put their mind to it.
Well, shout out. Well, definitely. Much love to Elena. And if Elena, you want to hit the show email account, we'd love to send you some free merch or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I am. I just every time that I read about the state of American healthcare or see any of the incoming austerity or any of the future designs of austerity, I am very glad that you are out there, Kim. So thank you so much.
Oh, the pleasure is mine.
All right, that does it for today's show, but we are not signing off yet until I plug one more time. Pre-orders for Year Zero, the Chapo Comics Anthology, are live now at badegg.co. So please check out our upcoming comics anthology, which you can pre-order right now at www.badegg.co. Link will be in the show description. Once again, I would like to really stress how excited we are about this project. If you haven't taken a look at it, like just like what the cover looks like and some of the art inside, you'll be hearing more about like some of our individual stories in the coming weeks. But once again, Year Zero, the Chapo Comics Anthology, our version of Tales from the Crypt, Master of the Macabre, Tales to Shock and Scandalize and Scintillate, is available to pre-order now at badegg.co.